how does lack of sleep impact cognitive performance? What if missing a few hours of sleep could age your brain by years? There's a shocking way that sleep disturbances is disrupting your focus, your memory, and aging your brain. In this video, you'll discover how sleep can supercharge your brain, enhance your focus, and boost memory for good. So why do we sleep? And why can we go longer without food than we can go without sleep? One of the studies that I looked at when it comes to sleep is researchers took college-age students and they put these college-age students through this sleep deprivation over the course of a month. And they tried to keep the students away from sleep as much as possible. And what they were measuring is different aspects of the brain through electroencephalogram. And what they found is that the students that had sleep deprivation, their grades started dropping. Their mental performance and cognitive performance dropped precipitously. The longer they went out without sleep, the harder it was for them to focus, the harder it was for them to concentrate. Now think of your state of being. How many of you have ever had multiple nights of poor sleep? Now, what the researchers discovered is many of these students had hallucinations. They had conversations with people in their head that they literally thought they had spoken to. They also found that they created an alternate reality. And we've seen not only did they start having mental diseases showing up, many of them could have easily been diagnosed with depression, with anxiety. Even a couple of the students ended up having almost like schizophrenic breakthroughs. And this is dangerous because a lot of us, we've been taught, I'll sleep when I die. Sleep is for sissies, or whatever the storyline is. But if you can make sleep the central part of your overall ageless future operating system, or the way that you start thinking, the first line of health is to get great sleep. And I'm going to show you why that's so critical. So our brain does interesting things when we sleep. First of all, if you measure brain waves, you'll start to see that there's electrical currency that allows us to have this conversation today around your brain and sleep. But your brain has certain wave patterns. And as you sleep, the beginning part of the sleep, if you can get to bed before midnight, ideally, I like to go to bed around 9 o'clock. And then what you'll notice is you'll get this nice boost of deep sleep in the earlier part of the night. And sometimes it can be a little later, but that deep sleep, what we're realizing is that's when your brain releases growth hormone. So you remember how good you felt when you were a kid? You'd like go to sleep. I would finish working on the farm and we work sun up to sundown in the summers. And I would just be like, oh, I'm so exhausted. And I'd wake up the next morning and I would just feel rejuvenated. Nothing hurt. I had all the energy in the world. And that's because I had lots of growth hormone. And I'm sure you can go back to the time when you slept really good, how good you felt. And that's because of that deep sleep stage that happens. The next thing that happens is we go through these approximate 90-minute cycles of REM sleep. And so our brains go into lighter sleep and then REM sleep. And we go through these different wavelengths. And when we're in deep sleep, that's what we call the delta waves. And the delta waves is where our subconscious mind is being accessed, which a lot of us believe that the subconscious mind is a big driver for everything in our life. So literally your conscious mind is informing your subconscious mind in this deep sleep state. And then your body is going to this entire healing, rejuvenating process. And then when you're going into REM sleep, that's when your brain is organizing all the things that you've learned from the day before. Because if you think of all the inputs that it's going around you right now, you can only remember a few things relative to all of the inputs that are coming in at you. But what happens at night in those REM cycles is that's where you have dreams. And in those dreams, your brain is very, very active. And if you've seen someone in REM sleep, you'll see their eyes moving and sometimes their bodies are moving. I see my dog sometimes. You can tell he loves playing fetch, and so he's this cute poodle. And so you could see him just like chasing and barking around the ball. And it's very interesting, but our brains do the same. And it's how we organize the information from the day before. And it's like organizing all of the things in your kitchen. You know where your silverware is. You know how to grab a glass. You know where your plates are. And without sleep, that's what we notice with these college students, is that things started to get disorganized in the brain. And so this very powerful network called the glymphatic circulation was discovered only about 15 years ago. And we realized this in 2010. We said, well, holy cow, the brain is actually detoxifying itself at night. And researchers have asked, what's the best way to sleep? Should I sleep on my sides? Should I sleep on my back? Should I sleep on my stomach? Well, the number one place is don't sleep on your stomach. It's really hard on your neck, hard to breathe. Sleeping on your back can be really beneficial because it elongates the muscles. But if you happen to have sleep apnea or your tongue slips in the back of your throat, you can snore and it can cause what's called sleep apnea, or you can get obstructive sleep apnea where your breathing gets blocked, and that can be a dangerous condition. But for the brain specifically, when you sleep on your left side, that's where we seem to have the best access for detoxification and the glymphatic circulation. And so when you can go through these sleep cycles, what we're realizing is not only do you get this nice secretion of growth hormone, but at night, as you start dimming your lights, and we call this the 3-2-1 method, and so this is what you can do right away. I've learned that 3 hours before you go to bed, if you stop eating, then you don't go to bed with a full stomach, and that makes a huge difference. Your body can now start to just relax, because the majority of that protein breakdown and breaking down the fats and the carbohydrates, that's been done. And so 3 hours before you go to bed, stop eating. 2 hours before you go to bed, stop drinking fluids. And a lot of people say, man, I wake up to urinate all the time and I don't have the energy and my brain doesn't feel as sharp. Well, if you stop drinking fluids, then you can urinate before you go to bed and then you'll sleep great. And then the third thing is an hour before you go to bed, it's the best time to just get really stressed about things. Like watch CNN or Fox News or, watch as many news stations. No, I'm joking. Don't do that. Just get rid of the screens. Stop scrolling. The hour before you go to bed is sacred time. It's a really good time. Like my wife and I were sitting by a fire last night and we're just having these deep conversations, how much I appreciated her and all the cool things that are going on in our life. And we were talking about the kids and, our kids are out of the house now. So we're like, man, we miss them. But we're so glad that they're going through, the pain in their early 20s and late teens because they're learning. And we also were able to reflect on how connected we've become as a couple. And that appreciation and that love that we felt allowed me to get a really good sleep last night. It didn't require any screen time. And actually, Facebook didn't miss me. I don't even know how to get on Facebook, but you get what I'm saying, right? So if you can set up these sleep hygiene rituals, and in many cases, I have my clients set an alarm. So literally set an alarm of when you want to go to sleep at night, and that becomes more important than the alarm of when you wake up. Ideally, just let your body wake up when it needs to. And one of the things that you want to make sure is in your room, you've got nice air circulation. Because the thing that blocks your brain more than anything is if you have mycotoxins in the air, if you have a moldy environment that you're living in, or if you're in an area where there's not good airflow and you build up carbon dioxide. Because remember, when you breathe out, it's carbon dioxide, you're breathing in oxygen. So have plants by your bed. Make sure that there's no mold in your environment. Get an air purifier like a Jasper or an air doctor. These are really important because we found that these mycotoxins in the environment, they can start getting into the brain and they can start causing all this disruption. When you have mycotoxins in your brain or infections in the brain, you'll start to lose that signaling of the cells and you won't feel as sharp cognitively. The other thing you want to do is make sure the temperature in your room is below 70. Now, it doesn't need to be super cold. I personally sleep with a bed jet. We've had things like the Sleep 8 that runs water to keep your bed cool. And it's really nice because my wife runs a lot colder than I do. And fellas, you can probably relate where you're like, how can you possibly be cold to your lady? But, and we're sweating over here. There's temperature regulations on beds. And yes, it's an investment. And if it's not in your budget, don't worry. Just make sure that you have ladder blankets. And actually, my wife and I, we have this beautiful set. They're the beds are together, but they have separate sheets and separate blankets. And so you can buy a set for your bed where the sheets are separated into twins. You can put it on your king. And then we have comforters that are separated too. So when I get hot, I can just throw it off and it doesn't impact her at all. So think about the sleep. Think about temperature. Think about air. You also want to make sure that you have no light, because your brain is going to be sensing that there's light, and that's going to be a stimulation. And then you want to make sure it's a quiet environment. And one thing that I love having is this nice eye mask, and then I'll listen to some binaural beats or isochronic beats before I go to bed that changes the wavelengths of my brain. Because sleep is foundational to everything, and without sleep, your worldview completely changes. You can have a pessimistic attitude that completely transforms into an optimistic attitude just by a good night's of sleep. You can be depressed about life and worried about the future the night before you go to bed, and if you sleep a great night's sleep, 7-8 hours, whatever it is that works best for your biology, you can wake up the next morning and have an endless amount of opportunities where the future is bigger. And so in order to set that framework for that so that you can have the proper thinking and to have the proper brain performance that you want, that's where sleep becomes critical. One of the things we've learned is there's a part of your brain called the hippocampus that gets turned off when we lose sleep. And we've actually done studies on our clients, and we've used a device called a Neurocatch, or it's an electroencephalogram, and we hook up these electrodes onto your brain. It's a 6-minute process, and we can start to see the activity in different regions of the brain. And so in this study is sleep deprivation and memory, and they did a meta-analysis of reviews on sleep deprivation before and after learning. And what they found is researchers suggest that sleep deprivation, both before and after encoding, has a detrimental impact on memory for newly learned material. In the study, what they found is that the information learned during wakefulness is initially encoded rapidly in your hippocampus, where memories are stored separately from existing memory stores. So what they were able to see is that if you have repeated reactivation of these new memories, primarily during the slow wave sleep cycles, then that supported the strengthening of memory representations and led to the integration of those memories in the neocortex. And so what you'll notice is sleep, when you have sleep deprivation, your reaction time is slower. And that's one of the reasons why cars now will say, drowsy driving, pull over, or drowsy driving has the same reaction time as intoxicated driving. And so sleep becomes this really interesting thing, because if you want your brain to really perform at its best, then you've got to sleep really, really good, because that's the way that our brain is more energized. Because your brain is actually working harder when you sleep than when you're awake. When you're awake, the brain uses approximately 20% of the electrical energy in your body. But when you're sleeping, your brain uses 25% of the body's electrical energy. So it becomes this massive opportunity for you to continually improve your brain. Now, I've seen clients in their 80s and 90s, and their brains are sharper than anyone in their 30s or their 20s. And I asked them, I said, well, what's the secret? How do you stay so sharp and so vibrant? How do you remember so many details? And what they've done is they've recognized that, well, I work on my brain every single day. And each one of these people, they have a sleep ritual where they go to sleep and they sleep through the night and they take care of their brain. They do neurofeedback, they do meditation, they read, they journal, they have a deep connection to a higher power. All those things help form the brain. But what the research shows is that if the hippocampus is not fully allowed to take these short memories, the things that you're learning today, where it's encoded, that information doesn't get transferred up to the neocortex, and you don't get the memories that you want. And so this whole notion of cramming before tests and trying to consolidate as much data as you can, it only works if you're sleeping. And one thing I love about the Japanese culture is they have this mantra, it's called just-in-time learning. And it was brought into, there's a concept called Kaizen, where it's like you do the little things day after day, and the little things lead to the big outcomes. And so one of the little things, it seems little right now, but one of the little things you can do when you're learning something new is you want to apply what's called the just-in-time learning method. And that's where you have a problem that you're working on. You say, maybe the problem is I want to figure out the best fitness routine for myself. And so you call Nikki up on our team, and you guys are in the gym at the office, and you're doing this workout routine, and then she sets things up for you on how to eat, the right macronutrients that you need, how to get the right hydration, the stretching, the recovery days, and you're overloaded with all this information. But the just-in-time learning means that, okay, the next day, Nikki is going to follow up with me and make sure that I've actually put my meal plans together for the week. I got the grocery shopping, I click the button, and all the proteins and the macros are there. I have the healthy food that I'm going to be eating. I have my day set up on recovery, so I know what to do there. But when you consolidate things down to a lesser period of time, that's where you can go to bed at night after you've planned out your whole fitness routine for the next week. And you go to bed at night and you wake up in the morning and it's all hardwired into your brain now. So it's much easier to create new habits in your life when you can follow these little principles. And it's the little things that lead to the big outcome. So have you ever felt like that loss of focus and you just feel reactive all the time and you just don't feel like you can complete a task? Well, a lot of people may blame it on ADHD, and there's a lot of treatments that have been thrown out at this problem. But what we found is that when you've got the slow reaction time, it is exacerbated with a loss of sleep. And so putting substances in your body like Vyvanse or Adderall or Ritalin, there's a time and a place for these. I'm not opposed to them, but they do have diminishing returns because what happens is when you're using different stimulants, you're drawing energy from one part of the brain and nutrients from one part of the brain to feed another. So if you do take those substances, make sure that you're getting plenty of acetylcholine or choline. So eat eggs, eat blueberries, eat lots of nice fatty fish like mackerels and sardines. The smaller fish are better, less heavy metals. The other thing that you can do is you want to make sure that you're getting plenty of time before you go to bed at night where you're actually resetting the brain, because when you're pushing these alpha beta waves with some of these substances, these stimulants, then what you'll notice is you don't sleep as deep and they can get in the way of your overall sleep performance. And so there's 3 things that I love to do to activate and reset that circadian rhythm. And actually in many cases, we've seen our clients be able to get off some of these more dangerous substances that are stimulatory just by fixing these patterns. So thing number 1 is there's a peptide called epitalin. And epitalin is a great reset peptide. It activates telomeres, so it's a telomerase enzyme. And peptides are these natural protein structures that exist in our body. And the researcher who discovered epitalin, Dr. Kovinson, he was actually deployed by the Russian military to help prevent cancer. And he found that if he could lengthen the telomeres and protect the DNA, then that would prevent the spread of cancer. But in his research, this is over 40 years ago, he also realized that people would sleep better. And so one of the studies, they took these elderly apes and who had sleep disruptions. They woke up a lot during the night. They seemed kind of lethargic and didn't have a lot of energy. And they gave them epitalin and it reset their circadian rhythm so they slept deeper. But epitalin works on your pineal gland. And the pineal gland is where melatonin gets released from, along with the gut and other tissues in your body. But if you can activate the pineal gland, and the pineal gland has these crystals in it, and a lot of people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, they say that's a way that you can access greater sources of clarity and consciousness. And so just by using this peptide called epitalin, I've had clients who haven't slept in 20 years, now they're sleeping. I've had women who are going through either their perimenopausal or postmenopausal, and the hormones didn't fix it, the supplements, the melatonin, the valerian root, all the natural things that you're aware of. Just by adding epitalin, it resets that circadian rhythm. And so epitalin can go really nicely if you have a growth hormone releasing peptide like sarcotropin or tesamorelin. And these have been studied, and they've found that using peptides that are on the growth hormone releasing peptide category, they can actually help induce more deep sleep. So you have more of a restorative sleep. And then the second thing you can do is called magnesium. And many of you know of magnesium, and there's magnesium glycinate, there's magnesium threonate, there's different types of magnesium, but unfortunately, not all magnesium is created equal. Most magnesium, if you look at the cell size, and then you look at this molecule called magnesium, it's too big to fit into the surface of the cell. So there's a nanoized version of magnesium. It's like the size of a ping pong ball if your cell was the Statue of Liberty. And so that allows that magnesium molecule to access the cells, and then magnesium turns on hundreds of genes that regulate the release of serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, anandamide, so it helps calm down the nervous system. And one of the things I love to do are what are called magnesium floats. And so you can go into these sensory deprivation tanks and you just hover on top of this bed of magnesium. So you're in water, magnesium, and it is one of the most grounding experiences. If you've never done it, give it a try. But if you don't have a float tank or not something close by, you can take this nanoized version of magnesium. The third thing that we've found to be incredibly powerful for sleep is NanoV. So NanoV is a device that a lot of UFC fighters use, a lot of professional athletes like NFL players, because it gets rid of the misfolded proteins in the brain. And it's a simple device. If you ever come into the office, you can sit down in our biohacking lounge. It's a gorgeous space in Utah, and you can just breathe in these vapors. It's structured water, but it's a magnetic pole that draws out those misfolded proteins and alleviates oxidative stress. In one of the studies that NanoV did, is they took athletes and they tested their VO2 max, and then they put one of the groups of athletes, so they had their baseline, and then they had two groups of athletes. In the control group, they were on a device that looked like a NanoV and smelled like it, everything looked the same, and they were breathing through just the non-structured water. And then the other group, they had all of the components, they had the real NanoV, and then they tested their VO2 max again. In the group that had NanoV, just by doing it for 22 minutes, they had an improvement of 7% in their VO2 max. And so these three things can be really powerful to reset that brain. So number one is the epitalin, and it's a great peptide, been around for a long time. Number two is the nanomagnesium, and then the third thing is the NanoV. For those of you who are ready to go to sleep now that you've listened to this video, I do have another one on cognitive action. We're going to talk about what to do when you're awake. So click on the link below, and I'll see you in the next video.